everybody, welcome to 1v1. I am your host, the enlightened and excited Eddie V. Joining me on this special 1v1 is the celestial brush of another Zelda podcast in Watch Brush Games, Celeste Roberts. Hello.
Good evening. Good evening. I wish I were in Hyrule right now. I don't think they're dealing with quite as much as we are over here. Maybe worse. Maybe worse. Depends.
And we have a special guest. He is from Zelda Dungeon. Please, everybody, welcome David Nystrom. Sorry.
Hello. No problem. Thank you.
Hello. How are you, good sir?
Doing fine. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. We're just talking a little bit Zelda things of me and Celeste and David talking about a little bit of Breath of the Wild. Just a little goodness. Because I gotta ask you, David, when we get close to the end, what do you think of our Breath of the Wild trilogy? And I cannot wait to hear your thoughts. So just think about it. We'll discuss it a little bit at the end. But before we go on, I do want to ask you, how did you get into creating content for Zelda Dungeon? Or how did you why did you choose Zelda? I should say also.
Well, I could give the cliche that Zelda chose me, or
I like that one.
So my relationship with Zelda as a game goes back to Ocarina of Time. I was at a friend's birthday party. I don't remember when exactly it was, but it was at some point after Ocarina of Time had come out in North America. And I went over to a friend's house for a birthday party, and we all were huddled around his 12-inch TV screen watching him play Ocarina of Time. I had no idea what the game was, but it was cool. I saw a dude on a horse, and he was over in the Gerudo Valley at the archery range where you shoot the targets on your horseback. And he was doing that and showing it off, and it was like, oh, this is so cool. And then I got to try it for 5 minutes before something happened, and kid's birthday party stuff, whatever. But I remember going home, and I remember asking my dad for it, because I pretty sure I had an N64 already at this time, and the only games I probably would have been Mario 64 and Cruisin' USA. But I remember I asked my dad for it. I don't remember if it was my birthday or Christmas, but at some point I got Ocarina of Time. And from that moment, I was hooked until I got to Goma's boss room, and I was too scared to go in.
Yeah, that one's a little different from horse archery.
Yeah, a little bit. But so over my adolescent years, I would run into a couple of moments where I either was too scared to go in, or the music freaked me out, so I would play it on mute. And then eventually I got to the water temple and was stuck there for at least a couple of years because I thought I had used a key in the wrong place. I was a young, inexperienced video game player, but I still loved the game. I would just, okay, I'm to the water temple, let's start over. And I would just play through the first couple levels and play through play through the whole child portion of the game multiple times. And then but I was hooked immediately. And I mean, throughout middle school, me and my friends, this was at the peak of the Pokemon trading card game.
Mm-hmm.
Yu-Gi-Oh was out. Card games were everything. Me and my friends would make our own Legend of Zelda cards and make our own card games to play and stuff with them, trading card games. I mean, that was the level of fandom that we had, or that at least I had. And then I played more and more games. I got better at them. I got to the point where I could play. I didn't need somebody's help to play a Zelda game anymore. But it was around whenever, it must have been 2010, 2011, whenever Skyward Sword came out. Mm-hmm. There was a kind of a defining moment that really got me into creating stuff for Zelda. And that was with the timeline. When the timeline came out, I was up to that point, I had been one of those people who had their own belief about how the timeline really worked, and this was how it had to be. And then the timeline came out, and it's well, all right, that's out. And so I got hooked into looking at that timeline. And me and a college buddy of mine were standing around one day and just talking, and we were where would you like to see a Zelda game? Like, looking at the timeline, what would you want to see? Because there's a couple spots where there's just dash marks. There's like time missing that they haven't gone into, or at this point they probably won't go into. But back then it was just fun speculation. It was the new version of timeline theorizing for me. And that's when I actually came up with The Era Without a Hero, which is my big fan project that I've been working on for now over 10 years. And it was looking at the timeline. There's the chunk when you branch off at the adult timeline, where you have the split between the adult and the child timelines. The child timeline leads to Majora's Mask, A Twilight Princess, and Four Swords Adventures. The adult timeline carries on without Link in that time, and you have the events of The Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, and yeah. But then there's that chunk between The Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time, and in Era Without a Hero, or in Hyrule Historia, they just labeled it as the Era with no hero. And it was like, well, this seems strange, because like I have to believe that somebody tried to stop Ganon, right? Like, not everybody was just sitting around going, yeah, okay, bad guys here, we can't stop you, all right, we'll be flooded, right? Like, that just it didn't click with me. And so that just got the gears turning, and one thing led to another, and it went through a whole bunch of different forms. Like, when I first started it was a video game. Like, I was like, I'm gonna make a video game, and it'll be this. Like, I'll find a way to make it. I'll find somebody that can help me learn programming, and I'll make it. Well, that fizzled out. But I'm like, well, I've still got all these maps, so I can still like put it out there, and I can let people see it, and it's really cool. And then I started getting into, well, why are we going to this temple? Well, I need a story. I need to make a reason for this. And then that slowly turned into the story that it is now. It went from that game to, okay, now it's kind of game and a story. And okay, it was going to be open world, but now there's going to be at least this linear story, and now it's going to kind of follow this, and it just kind of muddled and fuddled its way until I left for basic training, and then I put it down because I was in the military for 3.5 years, and I started to work on it again a little bit into there, but I didn't really start. I finished like the first draft of it while I was towards the end of my service. But then a few months later, I was trying to work on another project altogether. I'm like, all right, I'm going to write a whole new story, completely non-Nintendo. I'm going to just step away from it all. And then I got the itch after playing Breath of the Wild for like the second time through. I got the itch to pick it back up. I started revising it, and it was about 2 months later that I started working at Zelda Dungeon, making and writing stuff for them. And about a month or two into being on staff there was a question put out like, hey, we need some more fan fiction Friday content. Do we really want to keep it going? Are we running a little thin? Like, how's everybody feeling with that? And I'm like, I've got a 200,000 word novel on my desktop right here. And they're like, great, you're it. And I'm like, well, crap. I'm like halfway into revising like the first part of it. So I'm like, so since then as I'm revising it and getting a little bit further from that original first draft to where I'm at now with it. That was a really long answer. I'm sorry.
No, I read the prologue this evening. I've been following it, and I follow your account, as you know, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
And I also follow your Era Without a Hero account, and I see you post the different chapters as they come out. And this evening I sat down and read the prologue, and it was so visual. I could picture, well, I don't want to spoil anything. People haven't read it. But
I will. The prologue is just a framing narrative, so I don't think there's a whole lot to spoil there. The main, if you think about it this way, the main story ends before the beginning of the Wind Waker. So at some point, there's going to be a lot of water.
Yes.
It will end with a flood.
Yes, and you do a really great job of building up the suspense, because it's, at first I was like, okay, is it one of the pirates from Wind Waker? Is it Tetra on here? Is it Link? Okay, it's not Link. Who is this pirate captain? What are they looking for? Are they looking for the Triforce? And Ed, you got to check it out, because it's like, oh, I want to read more chapters now.
Well,
and it's really good.
There is also a podcast version of it. The prologue through chapter 7 are currently out and available. I was churning them out back to back to back, but then I got to a point where I had too much going on at once, so I needed to slow down. Mm-hmm. And since then, there's been about 2 episodes put out in the last 10 months. So it's drastically slowed down. There is no timeline for when the next episode will be released, although I do have chapter 8 recorded. I just need to polish it and stuff like that. So that might be coming out in the next month.
So it's like an audio book kind of.
Yes, that's what the podcast is supposed to be. It's supposed to be more or less the audiobook version of it.
That is smart.
Yeah. I do have to ask, because you mentioned the times where Link wasn't a hero or anything. I always wonder, and Celeste, you might want to ask this answer too. What is your theory about the king's role in the Zelda series? Even yes, he is having Princess Zelda. We never see who the mom is. We never meet the wife. And I wondered, has the king ever been to any of the dungeons or stuff that we never knew about? Did we have to create a role for the king? Because what is his role than just ruling that little portion of Hyrule?
I would assume that more or less he's just a male member in the Hyrulean family bloodline. Perhaps okay, this generation they didn't have a daughter, so therefore there's no Princess Zelda to be elevated to the throne. They had a son. Guess what? You're the next best thing. Here's your crown, kiddo. I mean,
I'm gonna.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say I'm gonna get philosophical, and I think he kind of represents regret in the game series.
Definitely in the Wind Waker.
Yes.
I mean, if you can spoil a 20-year-old game or 15-year-old game.
Well, it's mostly in a lot of the Zelda games, the king is dead. The king has sacrificed himself in some way. And I always wonder, what is your role? I wonder, was he in battle fighting for Hyrule, and he sacrificed his last breath, to continue to save Hyrule, to keep some of the Triforce, even though he's not part of the Triforce. He knows that, maybe he might be the part of the Triforce, and it passes down to Zelda. It's like a transference kind of thing.
Like a steward, yeah. He's basically there until there can be a true heir to that birthright, I guess.
Yeah, because that was my thing. Go ahead, Celeste.
Oh, I'm just this is a really good question, because he's just kind of a background character, except in Wind Waker and Breath of the Wild and
one of the CDI games. I mean, let's
let us not discredit the CDI game or even the cartoon.
Well, excuse me, Princess. I used to watch that every Friday after school.
Yeah. Gosh, can you? That was that era of we gotta make guys so smarmy.
A couple of my buddies have a podcast called Virtual Theater, and on their Patreon they are going through the Zelda cartoon, and dissecting each episode, and I mean it is. Oh.
Virtual Theater. It's a podcast, right?
Yes, it's a podcast. Their main focus is all on video game movies and stuff like that. So, they just put out an episode, I think, called on Tron, which is a video game inspired movie. So,
oh boy, I can't wait. I wrote it down. I literally wrote it down.
Well, it's funny that you that you work for a place called Zelda Dungeon, because what is it about Zelda's dungeons that I think that pretty much makes a Zelda game? I don't think it's sometimes I feel like it's not the characters, it's not the weapons, it's the dungeons themselves that stand out.
To me, so being kind of, if it wasn't obvious as I started talking about my story, I have a big passion for storytelling. Mm-hmm. The dungeons to me are actually they're not secondary to me because I think they are part of telling the story of Zelda, but it's the role that they play in the greater story. So like my favorite game period all time is Ocarina of Time. Like it is just everything else just falls short of it. Sorry, like that's just me.
No need to apologize.
Yeah. But it when I think of that game, there are temples that stand out to me, and it's the way that they made me feel. I mentioned being afraid of like going into Goma's lair. The music of Dodongo's Cavern scared me. But as an adult, I love those places. And actually, my favorite temple is the Shadow Temple, which is undoubtedly the creepiest, darkest, scariest place in that game.
The storytelling,
maybe the bottom of the well. But and minor spoilers, I will be visiting the Shadow Temple in my story, but that doesn't come until Act 3. That's all I will say on that. But there is so much like lore baked into these locations, and especially when you consider it in the idea of like of the timeline. So picture starting with Skyward Sword, where you see essentially the founding of the modern Temple of Time at the sealed grounds. You see the Elden Volcano before it's really shaped and exploded down into Death Mountain, presumably. So it had to go through something to change into what it looks like. You don't see necessarily the founding of Kakariko Village, but it's there. These locations that are there, you see them echoed throughout other games, and there's great examples of that in Breath of the Wild, where we know we're at least 10,000 plus years, 10,100 years plus any other Zelda game, but you still see you can go to the Spring of Courage, Power, and Wisdom, and all at the top of one of the mountain forests, and then up in Akala, and these are the same. They're almost shot for shot the same locations that you visited with Zelda and Skyward Sword. So you're talking millennia. Now, and the same kind of thing can be said about some of the temples. None of the temples have ever been, to my knowledge, like mirrored like that. But you have to imagine there's ruins of them somewhere. Perhaps that's what some of the Zonai ruins are, is they were built up around what used to be the Forest Temple, maybe, even though the Lost Woods is way up in there. So maybe the Forest Temple ruins are up there in that dark area that you can't see around. I don't remember what it's called in Breath of the Wild. But so that when I think of the temples, I think of them as temples and dungeons. I think of them as a storytelling device to show over the centuries, over the years, some of the influences and some of the beliefs that the people in Hyrule have.
That's a great answer. Yes, because especially with deities, and didn't Ganondorf have the Goron's sacrifice to Volvagia? I say Volvagia. Is it Volvagia? How do you guys pronounce it?
I've always said Volvagia, so I don't
want to insult anybody. Have them come after me.
The boss with a V for his name in the English translation there.
yes. The really cool dragon.
Yes.
That's a great answer. Yeah, because they would go to worship, and then the Spirit Temple has the goddess statue
right
as well. It's blatantly there.
Yep.
But it's so weird that the dungeons, the way that they transform from the past Zelda games to Ocarina of Time, because like if you look at it, Ocarina of Time kind of feels like the reboot. Me and Celeste, we was discussing about that Ocarina of Time feels like it's a reboot from the Zelda series. Like they redid the whole the whole story, because like the Legend of Zelda, Link 2 and Link to the Past, all of them had where not so much Link to the Past, maybe Link to the Past, where the Triforce, the 7 pieces made up the Triforce, and then they just got rid of that when Ocarina of Time came, because the dungeons were meant for the Triforces. It was never meant for anything else.
Well, they also, some of the early criticisms of Ocarina of Time was that it was just a remake of A Link to the Past, because they had the sages that was the same. They had, some of the locations were the same, and so that was one of the early criticisms of Ocarina of Time was, oh, it's just a remake of A Link to the Past in 3D. It's not, when you look at it realistically. It was actually meant to tell it was meant to be the prequel to A Link to the Past, which technically it was with the timeline, but it was done. It was done. They didn't have the drive for that level of storytelling when they made the game. One of the things that Zelda has always been about gameplay first, which is always to me been like, well, okay, but the story.
Yes, that's how I feel too. Like, oh, did you guys have fun beating 100ing this game? And I'm like, oh, I was kind of worried about reading everything I found.
well, yeah, because Ocarina of Time, the big thing about that was the Z targeting. Like, if you read GamePro EGM, it was always just like how Z targeting worked in 3D and how that kind of made future 3D games. Like, when you target on a person, this is what it's supposed to mean, and why the camera needs to be on that one character. You finish it, and then you could target something else.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, I mean,
so cool.
Yeah, Zelda has always been cutting edge. If you go back to the original, when they implemented the ability to save your game, that was mind-blowing in the original Legend of Zelda.
Especially for a game that huge. Right. You hope that you can save that game.
Yeah, because like everything was passworded,
Right.
Yes, like make passwords.
Right. If you didn't play a game full out through and you cut your NES off, you had to start all over. If you was playing Metroid, if you knew the code that they gave you after you died, you could put it in and continue there. And then like the Legend of Zelda, like had those 3 save spots, and it was just like you got to name yourself as a character, but then if you do this trick, the dungeons are rearranged. You're playing the Japanese version. That you like, people didn't know about that and stuff. But I do want to ask you guys, Darksiders, and Okami, they have a Zelda influence in them, because of some of the storytelling and going to these dungeons and everything. And at a point, you'll get a power that will make you go further into it. What did you guys, if you played it or not, or just even read about them, what did you guys think about that? That there is like games that have been influenced by Zelda, or that is actually in competition of Zelda because they have a certain flow and pattern to them.
So I can't speak to either Darksiders or Okami. I haven't played them. I'm a bad gamer. But from what I've heard of them, I know that I know Darksiders is kind of teased as Zelda for adults because it's supposed to be much harder, and and same with like Dark Souls and games like that. It's Zelda but for adults. Yeah, is it? I'm pretty. There's some pretty dark stories in Zelda too. So that's all that I can really speak to is that whenever people tell me, oh, you should play Darksiders, or you should play this because it's like you love it because it's like Zelda but it's more mature, it's more grown up, and I'm like, I play horror games. I know mature games. If I want that, I'll go play a horror game. I'll go play Resident Evil for the 3rd time. I'll go play Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 6. I'll go play Fatal Frame. I'll let my wife play it because those are her favorite games. It's that if I want a more mature story, I'll play Outlast. I don't mind. But
what about you, Celeste?
I think I don't know much about Darksiders, but with Okami, there's that mythology with it, with the goddess, and then Amaterasu, the little wolf, the fox. She's a wolf, right? It's been a while, y'all. When you get my age, it's
a wolf.
Just the mythology of the games, and I think as we've developed the ability with graphics and 3D versus 2D. 2D games can still have good lore, of course, but we've been able to expand that, and with music, with storytelling, because games can hold more data now. They can get as sophisticated as they like, but Zelda, I like that it's a little bit of everything. There's joy, there's humor, as David said. There is some horror in it, and I didn't catch that with the Shadow Temple when I was 9 years old playing that game. I was like, oh, this is just a creepy place. And then as I got older and started reading about what happened with the Shadow Temple and the Sheikah, oh, maybe the Hylians aren't so benevolent and innocuous as I thought. But what about you, Ed? I think you have something you want to say about those two games in particular.
Well, I've beaten Darksiders and I've beaten Okami, and they do have this Zelda feel to it, but they're still yet in their own. Darksiders is more of a comic book because it came from a comic artist, and their like design, the way that they tell it, has a comic feel that Zelda doesn't have. Okami has this water painting Japanese, like you said, mythological kind of sense to it, but it really plays on Japanese zodiac signs, where you are Amaterasu, but you are the mother of all the gods. So every time, because they were just like mother to all, like, and like nature and stuff like that. So you represent kind of saving the world and taking care of the world that you're in from darkness and stuff. And every like, you'll meet a tiger, you'll meet a cat, you'll meet like pigs and monkeys and other dogs, and they all are, there's these animal spirits are representing Japanese zodiac signs and stuff, and they're coming and they're giving you these powers so you can use your celestial brush to create more things to get further in. But the designs for both games is that you go in these dungeons, you solve these puzzles, you do these challenges. For some of them, you'll fight a mid-boss, and after you get that finish that mid-boss, you get that power. When you finish that boss, you get that extra life, that extra energy that you need.
Very Zelda-like.
With the heart containers.
Yeah, but but when you get out of those dungeons and stuff, you're free to do side quests. You're free to go collect souls or collect money and stuff to buy equipment and things like that. With Zelda, you really don't buy that much. You might buy the wooden, not buy the wooden sword. You might like get a stick or something. And you might get a cheap shield, but you continually don't really use you really don't use your currency in Zelda, but you do use a lot of currency in the other two. So that's kind of where the difference comes from. But I think everybody like came to that conclusion that it's just Zelda X style because of those dungeons.
You made me think of this Zelda being the spirit of Helia in Skyward Sword when you talked about Amaterasu. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm butchering this poor dog's name. This poor goddess's name. Because she's taking care of the earth, and Zelda has to help take care of Hyrule now. She's reincarnated, and she's a goddess reborn. I know people like to make fun of Skyward Sword, and the controls for me were a hindrance. I think they're cool, but I'm so happy we have that storyline, and I hope that in the future they can release it for the Switch or another Nintendo platform.
If it wasn't because of Breath of the Wild, Skyward Sword would be my number one Zelda game.
Yeah.
Like I love Wind Waker. I love Twilight Princess. Skyward Sword made me laugh. It made me feel in this real world, and it was like the dungeons felt different. They felt challenging, and they made me really think. And it was just like, this is the first Zelda that really made me be like, I need to zone in, because I think one of the boss battles is like a bowling alley, like you got to roll a ball or something. I think it's the second dungeon,
the magma area.
Yeah, you have to get into the boss chamber first. You have to like roll a bowling pin, like a big old ball down a like a snake, like a serpentine,
Yeah.
whatever thing. And then when you're in there, he's like on this platform that teeter totters, and you have to roll out of his
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
That was very innovative, especially using the controls, the unique control system they have for that one. That's a good point. Just thanks, Ed. Now I'm gonna have to go play Okami again because it's been a while. Yeah, I really.
Wasn't there like this big bird penguin looking one where you like when you first get your bird and you fly down, you go to the land, in Skyward Sword. He
Your
looks like a big.
there's your Loftwing, the big crimson bird that you have. But I don't remember.
Yeah.
Zelda has one too. I don't remember what color hers is.
Blue, I
But
think.
but when you land down like underneath that the sky, and you meet and you're on like actually adventuring, and you meet like this big like looking bird thing, penguin thing. I cannot think of his name, but he was the first character that I paused the game, and I think I went on Facebook or something, and I was just like, I want to set some plushie. I want to set some plushie.
Oh, are you
Like,
thinking of the Kikwi tribe?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
love
They do look like
them.
penguins.
Yeah.
They do kind of look like penguins now that I'm looking at
I
them.
met them, talked to them, laugh. I was just like, I need a plushie of these. Like,
They're pretty cute. Their little noises, and that was my favorite area in Skyward Sword, especially the water. It's absolutely beautiful in that area.
Yeah.
But I have some questions for David, and
go ahead.
if you unless you have some more, Ed, I don't want to
go ahead.
derail you.
Go,
Okay.
go.
So I was not stalking you, but we talked last week, and then I looked up your website that you have on your Twitter account, and so you're an Air Force veteran. Thank you for your service, first of all.
Yes. Yeah.
And
my pleasure. Yeah.
do you wish that you could have had a Loftwing instead of a plane, instead of a jet?
I never. The closest I came to a jet was in a hangar with one that had no engine in it. So just because I was in the Air Force, I was never near a plane. I did all sorts of like I did calibration, and that's what I actually still do just as a civilian now. But if I had the opportunity to have a Loftwing, oh, absolutely, I would have a Loftwing. Would I have the courage to hang onto its back and ride around? That's a different story. But it'd be awesome to have that as an option.
Was your time in the military influential on your stories, do you think?
Yes, in some way. So there are some military aspects to some of the characters. One of the major characters in the story is Impa. She's got a smaller role in like the first third of the story, but the second and third parts she has a much larger role. But she is one of her duties is to be the general of the Hyrulean army, or the Hylian army, and so that is her role. Like she has that role, and to help educate and raise Princess Zelda. Those are her two roles in life, and that is what she does. And she is very, very strict when it comes to her military stuff. And some of that is taken from what I know of, like, okay, this is how it needs to be. This is how it would be done in the military. So I've tried to put as much of that into the military side of the characters. And there's actually, so you have, in my story, I have like the regular army, and then I have the Knights of Hyrule, who with the Wind Waker, you get the Knights crests and stuff like that. Every Knight of Hyrule is issued one of those, and they wear it at all times as like an identifier to be like, I am a Royal Knight of Hyrule. You are, basically as a status symbol. But I also kind of use it as a differentiator between what we would see in the U.S. military between enlisted and officers. Officers inherently have a higher rank. All Knights of Hyrule are basically officers. They have a higher rank. They outrank all volunteer soldiers that are just, here you're gonna stand in line with a pike. That's one of the distinctions too that I put in there. So
that is cool that you have firsthand experience and can apply it to your creative writing.
Yeah, it's been helpful with that at least.
So Ed, it just by coincidence, David and I talked last week through messaging because he was thinking about teaching overseas in Japan.
Yes.
So I reached out to him. I said, hey, if you ever have any questions, please message me. And we just started talking. And you want to be an English teacher.
That is what I'm currently in school for right now. I'm working to be a high school English teacher. One of my biggest inspirations in my life, it was one of my high school English teachers. He was an Army vet. He was he also ran our high school radio station and did some of like our theater production stuff in high school. And so there was not a day in high school where I wasn't hanging out either in his office or working right alongside him doing one of those things, because that was me in high school. I was at least as far as like my extracurriculars, I was always involved in the drama club, choir, and our radio program. I did color commentary for football and was the home narrator or homecaster for all of our in-league basketball games on actual radio, and it was a blast.
Oh, nice.
That is cool.
It was awesome, one, because it was so much fun. It was what I originally went to college for. I got to get into all the games for free.
Nice.
It was like,
That's
go up to
awesome.
the thing. I'm with the radio. I'm going up to the booth. You don't need to
Flash your badge. I'm
Pretty
the
much,
press.
yeah.
I'm the press.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. It was.
Oh, that is awesome.
But so going back to that, is one of the things when I got out of the military and I started working back in the civilian field, I was like, yeah, I can't do this forever. In the military, I could do it while I was in the military. I can't do this forever in civilian life. I need a job that I love and want to do. And then I got to thinking, I reached out to him, my old English teacher, and we talked a little bit, and I asked him some questions. And then, it was maybe 3 months after starting my civilian job that I was like, I was in school already and taking. So I'm one class at a time right now online. And so it's not to knock online school, but it's a little different than if I had made that decision and been in like brick and mortar classroom when I had graduated high school. If I had perhaps taken my education a little more seriously. Take your education seriously, kids.
Exactly.
You still learned with the military.
Yes.
I know what you're saying. I know.
Yeah, I learned so much more than I probably would have if I had gone into sportscasting like I originally wanted to. I probably wouldn't have lasted. I probably would have gotten burnt out, frustrated, and not been where I am today. So, and I don't think I made the wrong decisions. I don't think I've made. This is going too deep.
No, it's all about you tonight.
Oh, well, thank you.
Now we have to ask you, what would you do for world peace after this?
Oh, wow.
Like Miss Congeniality.
I'll be back.
No.
No, but it, I don't know where I was going. Teaching. One of the things that I want to do with teaching is my love of storytelling. Part of that love came from him because, up until that point, yeah, I did okay in classes. I was an A, B, an occasional C student. I was a good student, not a great student. As some people might say, a chronic underachiever. But when I got to his classes, he did something different, and I could never figure out what it was. But now I know, and it was just that he had a way of storytelling. He made the stories interesting. He made it more than you need to learn the way that this sentence is structured for your A, B, and C test. It helped me appreciate story. It helped me, up until that point, I thought I had to be like this hard, this tough guy. I had to listen to only rock music. I can't listen to like soft rock. I had to listen to hard rock. I walked in on him one day. He was eating his lunch. He's sitting there listening to Katy Perry and has like no shame about it whatsoever. And I'm like, dude, you can do that? And I'm like, it was just like a mind-opening experience. And I mean, like if high school, like freshman year me could see me now, he would be like, what are you doing, dude? And I'm like, oh, this is called K-pop and it's amazing.
Yes, you were. I think you had tweeted about something about K-pop recently.
I'm a K-pop junkie. I have no shame about it. It's my wife. Side story. A couple of, for Mother's Day, my son and I made my wife like coupons, like a little coupon book. And one of the coupons in it that she can pull on me is no K-pop for a week because it's all this.
Wow.
I don't think there has
been
been
yourself up for that one.
I don't think there's been a month that's gone by that she hasn't pulled that card.
How many did you give her?
Well, she could reuse them. I made like a laminated them and everything, so she could use it. So there's like 6 of them or 12 of them, and she can use them one per month. Like, so each card is good once a month or something like that. But
I see what you shot yourself in the foot with that one.
I have headphones. I'll just put those in and sing and dance to them that way.
Okay. So you can listen to it in
just
some
now
way.
Around her. Yeah. So like if I'm cooking, if I'm cooking dishes, and I have it blasting, she can come in and pull that card, and it's like, all right, fine.
You know, the teaching thing has me thinking, Ed and David, and I want both of your opinions on this. It's something I'm very passionate about. I view video games as virtual storybooks. That was one of my final papers when I was in university in my senior year. And David's rocking out.
That is a absolutely yes.
And I think they need to be taken more seriously. And Ed and I are going to harp on this, but Edith Finch, for example, comes to mind. What Remains of Edith Finch, if you've ever played it, but Zelda as well, with the lore, the storytelling. It's just a different way of storytelling. Yet I still felt as engaged or more while playing a Zelda game as I do reading a book that fully grabs my attention. So I'll let you guys play rock, paper, scissors or something, so who can go first? But I want to hear your opinions on video games as art form, as literature.
I would go first on this one. I think to take one game, a dragon named Cancer. This was a game about a guy who, like, he lost his son to cancer, and like he created this this fictionalized kind of story to, to really bring out his emotions and what he was going through and stuff. And when I was reading, he has a story on Wire on how everything came about, and he said that he got to one point where it said that he knew what was going to happen because he programmed it or he read it and stuff, and he couldn't touch the controller because it was so emotional for him. And I think when there's stories that really that you could connect with, when there's story beats and stuff that games can connect with, you feel that this is a different kind of visual representation of a story. You could always a book could always get turned to a movie adaptation and vice versa. You really can't do that with games because there's other factors into it. But if you got something like Cancer Named Dragon, Papa and Yo, about the creator's dad being an alcoholic and creating this world with monsters and stuff, it's just like it gives you a different sense, because when you play the game and get the story, you're like, oh man, that was just such an enjoyable experience. But then when you see the creators' story behind the games and stuff, it brings it to a new level, because their story that they're telling in the game sometimes reflect the stories that's going on in their life, the real things. And so video games are able to express that and really give you a different sense about it than just literary books and stuff. Books they do such a good job, but you really gotta like pay attention and remember things and things like that. I think when there's a visual representation from a video game that really sticks in your mind, and it's a really point that hits you, and that you just be like, wow, it really brings out something. It really brings a meaning to it. And sometimes it's a memory that is going to be stuck with you, that you hope to see that others got that same memory and got something similar. So I think games being as a storytelling, not so much a storytelling tool, but like a storytelling kind of like narrative for people, it really says something about how games are powerful. Then I'll turn it over to you, David. I was kind of thinking about this, and it hit me in a weird spot. Like, how can people who play the modern God of War want to talk about narrative? And it was just like, narrative has always been here, but you guys chose not to play those games to get those experiences. So why is it this particular game now makes you want to focus on narrative? Because I'm just like, if you haven't played like The Last Guardian or even The Legend of Zelda or so even shoot like Black Belt or something like that, if you haven't even played some of the older games that really gave you a story, you've been missing out for years that we have already known about, in a sense. So, but David, what are your thoughts?
I absolutely think that games are an art form, a form of storytelling, and all of this stuff. And I mean, right off the bat, games that came to mind: Life is Strange, Death Stranding, Detroit Being Human, or Be Human, whichever one. Those are all very deep story games. And I mean, Death Stranding is a bit of abstract, but there's some serious depth to that. If you've finished that and you've sat through the credits and then watched the end of the game, and it's just like, when my wife and I finished that, we had to set the controller down and just go, huh, okay. And it was one of those moments of, we're not sure what the story was there, but at the same time we knew what we got out of it, and we were like, okay, there was, I mean, this could be said probably about any Hideo Kojima game, that there is always, like, to quote a certain ogre, it's like an onion. You can just start peeling back the layers.
I know exactly which ogre you're talking about.
But he lives in a swamp. That's the worst. Oh, never mind. Okay, that was the worst impression. Anyways, but no, yes, absolutely. Games should be more respected as an art form, because there is so much story to it. Now, that's not to say that all games are this way. Mm-hmm. There are games that are just, hey, it's just a fighting game. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Then that's fine. Not everything has to be this, not everything has to be Life is Strange on this, super deep level. Not everything has to be The Last of Us. They don't all have to be super serious, super brooding, super intense. They can be fun. They can be funny, and they can evoke any emotion that the writer or the creator wants.
Look at what Super Metroid did on how that story got across without barely using any narrative.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and that, you go tie back to Zelda again. You mentioned Ed. You mentioned it, Skyward Sword. That as far as storytelling goes, I mean, anybody that says any other Zelda game does a better job at storytelling, send me your argument, because that game's story, that was the first game that I played that actually made me cry. There was a certain moment later on in the game with Zelda and Link, and you're just, it's going to be okay, but you don't. Like, you're just, it was such an emotional moment to me. I remember playing that, and that was the first time in a video game that I remember setting the controller down and just going, whoa. And like needing a minute to just kind of go and just, okay, it's all right, it's okay, because it's a story. It's just like any other story. It's that to me is the Gandalf saying, it's the Gandalf falling into darkness moment. That is your, I'm drawing a blank on movies here. I was trying to make another, like, an actual movie reference, not just the literary reference, but there is so much storytelling in games, and the ability to learn from games and the stories that they can tell. There shouldn't be this. There doesn't need to be a stigma of, oh, it's just a video game, because there can be those moments in those games, just like in books, just like in movies. There can be those I am your father moments of, oh my gosh, that just happened. It can be that level of there is the Star Wars level fandom in video games. There is one of my favorite classic literary books is the Inferno, Dante, part of Dante's comedic trilogy. That is that is one of the all-time like high bar pieces of literature to me. But at the same time, I've seen that referenced in video games many times because I play a lot of horror games. So
and there's even a video game
exactly.
Yeah.
With it.
And that helps. That just helps helps show like, okay, you want to go into this literary device, let's explore it in the video game format. There's another one. I just thought of it. I can't remember the name of it. It's an art-based game. No, it's a video game that you're wandering around. You're an artist.
Is it the Swan, the Unfinished Swan?
No.
What system?
It's on all of them now. It's an older game. But it's a first person. You're walking around like a house, and every time as you go through the house, it becomes more and more twisted. Oh shoot, I can't remember it. It's gonna drive me nuts.
East Shade?
No.
Because I'm looking it up, and is it a horror game?
Yeah, it's
Layers of Fear.
That's it. Yep, Layers of Fear.
Okay.
Yep,
I found it.
And that's another one of those it's so deep. There is so much you could read into that and experience in that game. So, yes, the short answer is absolutely yes. Story, literature, video game. I think when I become an English teacher, I'm going to find a way to work some sort of video games into my classroom, whether the school board likes it or not.
I know, for some people, when it comes to narrative, Final Fantasy VII, Era's Death stands out. Just that visual representation of seeing the music, seeing how all of that came about. Like, it took video games in the 16-bit area. They had memorable stories, but those stories were like fun, adventurous things, and you didn't really understand how death played a role in it. And then when cutscenes started having different art styles and CGI, and you are actually seeing a character that you control lose his life and stuff, it brings a different meaning to it,
yeah, no doubt that the visual, the step up in visuals has made that more impactful to certain people. For some people, that can feel more through reading, that can learn more through reading, it didn't necessarily make as big of a step. But for people who are extremely visual in their learning style, who are extremely visually excited, stimulated, the step up in graphics has definitely increased the ability of video games to tell stories. And I think that's, to go back to Death Stranding, I think that's a great example of that, of how the visuals can really play an impact on the storytelling. So
yeah, cause in a way, that's how Rhyme is also, in a sense, because Rhyme it's a visual game that you play and you adventure in, but the music is driving the narrative of emotion. So it's really making you feel things. Like you're getting some action scenes, so the music would play this, but when it's a quiet, somber moment, you just hear this music, and it's just like, okay, things are at ease and at rest, but yet I know I have a journey I need to continue to figure out what is going on.
Yep.
Y'all might laugh at me, but I think David had said, some games can just be a fighting game. And that's absolutely true. But I will say, when I was a little girl and we'd go to the arcade and I'd see the Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter screens, whenever they would have the little summary of the fighters' stories, I would stop and I was just mesmerized.
Oh, yeah.
The background, what's their motivation? Oh my gosh, this one's a princess. This one's her evil twin sister. Oh, here's their mother, the queen, and she's apparently able to scream really loudly.
And welcome to what made me end up writing a Zelda novel as opposed to making a Zelda game. Oh, I've got to find out what happens here. Why is this like this?
I mean, okay. I'm not a professional. I'm not an elitist. I'm not in an ivory tower, but people have been looking at scribbles and motions and brush strokes on canvases and
Bananas duct tape to wall.
yes, just people have been looking at carved marble. People have been looking at words on paper for deeper meaning. That can be applied to anything that elicits an emotion from you, that makes you think on a higher level. And video games do help with critical thinking skills. 100%.
Oh, yeah.
It's the interpretation for different things, whether it's movies, books, video games, real life, anything. Your interpretation is always going to vary on how you take it in and what it means to you.
Yep.
And when that happens, you as a person who's taking the interpretation is creating that narrative, creating that story. So you would be like, okay, there's a banana taped on the wall. Maybe Nintendo did a level in Mario Kart where the thing turned and someone there was a tape thing on the ground. Maybe Donkey Kong left the banana there.
Instead of a banana peel, an uneaten banana.
And it's just like, no, someone just put a banana on the wall and taped it. The different interpretations people are maybe creating that story. As weird as it is, that's how narrative and story driven stuff means to us, that we create that narrative when we get that interpretation.
This is not a video game, but have you guys ever seen that movie Mona Lisa's Smile in like the early 2000s?
A while ago, yeah.
No, I haven't.
She's an art professor, and she's showing the girls, it takes place in the 50s, she's showing the university students these different art pieces. Some are very sophisticated and lifelike, like things by Leonardo da Vinci and Rembrandt. And then she shows them a cave dwelling painting, and she said, why is this not considered art? Just, it's so interesting how people can, like you were saying, Ed, how different interpretations that could touch somebody. Maybe a child remembers going to the zoo by seeing that piece of art, or some pieces of art make you sad while they make other people happy. And just also the historical context for art pieces, what was going on at the time to inspire that piece. We can get really deep with video games, because video games can reflect, Ed, that article you're talking about by the other day, Lasby, I read that one as well. I was like, well, this is a deep dive. This is cool. And that's what video games can inspire. And like David here is thinking about his military experience to bring that into a video game to create this world. And I'm assuming there's some kind of touch of politics and
there's there's absolutely touching on politics. There's touch on religion very subtly. I don't want to dive into that in the story that much, but if you go by what the backstory from the Wind Waker is, they prayed to the gods for a savior. Nothing came. Ganon came. The gods flooded Hyrule. That is the canon backstory from the Wind Waker. There's definitely some religiosity that can be read into that, and that is something that I do explore a little bit in my story. Again, it's not one that I'd go overly deep into. The more deep religious stuff would be, say, a cult worshiping Ganondorf. That's, that is something that is existent, especially later on in the story. There's been hints of it up to this point, where it's at Zelda Dungeon. Now, on where it's published to on Zelda Dungeon, there's the last chapter that was just released is like the beginning of the end of part 1. So like think of it as the end of the Fellowship of the Ring is where the story's at there.
I would say it's almost kind of like Castlevania in the sense that Dracula is that Ganondorf, the Belmont is that Link, and it continuously change. But you have side stories, you have side games where there are people who always are trying to resurrect Dracula.
Right. Well, I mean, that you see that, like you said, like I was saying, that's in Zelda too. Especially you see it in in Breath of the Wild with the Yiga clan. They're still loyal to Ganon. He's dead, but they're loyal to him. Zelda 2 also has this a lot. That is every enemy's goal that you fight outside of a palace. Their goal is to kill Link and spread his blood on Ganon's ashes to bring him back from the dead. One,
That's dark.
Right.
And two, that's that idea of there's bad guys hunting the good guy to bring him back. And that's to bring back the bad guy because they're so devoted to him. They're religiously sworn to him. They are religious followers. They're religious zealots.
And the Zelda series needs that because you cannot have.
What? Did I freeze? Oh no.
Yeah, I froze for a bit.
Oh.
The Zelda games need that because you cannot have 2 of the 3 Triforces. You got to have all 3 to have the Zelda universe. In this timeline, you have to have those 3. Without one of them, it would not happen. It will find a way to come into play. But if you don't have it, you don't have a Zelda game. You don't have a Zelda story.
That's a good point. And when you brought up Wind Waker, it clicked with me today. It has a bit of a Noah's Ark tale to it because
certain people survived. They were
they were warned.
Right, they were chosen to go to the religious term.
Yeah.
Not to go deep into that topic, but that's a debate in Christian theology is the chosen versus election versus chosen, basically. And that's but that's we're going like real deep cuts here
with the rapture and everything.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And that's why video games, we have people who create art like video games. Yes, I'm calling video games art. They're inspired by what they experience in the real world and they create something else. So of course they'll have tones that you could see reflected back into what you experience in real life. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it helps create empathy. And if you look at the Gerudo, for example, they're almost, in Breath of the Wild, they're not quite as ostracized. To an extent, they're still not as trusting of outsiders, especially males. But I think Ocarina of Time was their debut, and I was just like, I kept wondering what happened. Why are they all the way over here? Why are they thieves? What's going on? So
it's kind of, the Gerudo is kind of like the Wonder Woman of the Zelda.
Yes.
In a sense, if you look at it. Like how people just like, we don't need a man, we're powerful warriors. And I think that just expanded the Zelda series. And Link is just like, I'm really here, so I could get stronger and help save the world. I'm not trying to hit on y'all. I'm not trying to steal from y'all. I have a journey that, I have a fate that I must see through. And you guys are part of my fate.
Go ahead. The Gerudo have a really interesting side thing too, and that's in Ocarina of Time they talk about it. It's not really been touched on since, but every 100 years there's a male born, and he is to be their king. How do they deal with that exactly in some of those aspects? In Breath of the Wild, we don't see that really play in there. There's no indication that there's a male that has been born, or there's clearly no indications of a male being born. At least there's no pregnant Gerudo ladies walking around the town. But there's think back to, this is going back to my story a little bit here. Go back to Ocarina of Time, post Ganon's defeat. How do you think the Hylians would react to that idea, that belief that, last time there was a guy, now apply some unfortunate real worldism to this. How would a group of people who the last time a male was born there, they came in and wiped us out and took over our country? How should we deal with that? And that is a dark tone. It's a very dark tone, but it is one that I touch on in my story.
Okay, I need to have you reached that point yet, or are you not there yet?
I will say there is a male Gerudo. His name is Adok. He is my main villain in the Era Without a Hero. Um, he is theoretically that male-born child.
Yes, that's a good point because
Hmm.
I've wondered, does it always have to be Ganondorf? Does he always have to be evil?
There is a lot to Adok. One of my friends and one of the fellow editors, Judy at Zelda Dungeon, she's more because she kind of like she curates all the fan fiction Friday stuff. So I've let her in on some of the secrets of the story, like a few chapters ahead of time, and she is
Hmm.
like, I want to know more about Adok. She wants because his story is that what happens to that child when he is born in a world where the last time his race had a male-born child, they were the arbiters of destruction of the rest of the world. Not all of them, you know, the ones that were loyal to Ganondorf, meaning his surrogate mothers, Twin Rova, and
Hmm.
all their disciples, and all of Ganondorf's loyal minions. How would they would have been perceived as war criminals, post Ganon's defeat. Hyrule probably would have imprisoned anybody that was still swearing allegiance to Ganon, right? So what happens when this male child was born in a world where he is seen as a threat? He is seen as a perceived threat, and how does he become what he is, and that's one of the stories that is explored, one of the side stories, but it's also part of the main story that is explored in my story, the Era Without a Hero. So
Hmm.
That sounds really deep. And when you said the war criminal things, I was like, oh, are they going to have like a Nuremberg trial for these
that
characters?
I don't touch on that there. So one of the things that I'm doing. So the main story of the Era Without a Hero takes place 100 years after Ganon's defeat. So all right there you can see that there's that 100-year gap. So a male Gerudo, according to prophecy, would have been born. Hint hint, he was. But one of the things that I'm exploring and getting ready to start releasing is an exploration of that 100-year gap between Ganon's defeat and the beginning of the Era Without a Hero, the story. One of the timelines is essentially in that early period following Ocarina is a Gerudo civil war between those who would still be loyal to Ganon and will do anything in their power to bring him back, and those who are like, look, y'all are crazy. We don't want this. This is not okay. He was evil. And them siding with the Hylians. And so you have kind of like this civil war between where you have the Gerudo who are like realizing, yeah, Ganondorf was evil, should not have been our king. We should have, imprisoned him or something, or not let him have such ambition. uh, and they're sided with the Hylians versus this rogue clan of essentially rogue clan of Gerudo, who years later, or a few years after I had started writing this and had this idea, Breath of the Wild comes out and gives them a name of Yiga, and I was like, oh, well, that's a good name for them. I don't call them the Yiga because I don't want to. I don't. They're not quite the same.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I actually call them the Dragmire clan, which is an allusion to Ganondorf's
Oh,
actual last name. So,
that
um,
makes a lot of sense. It's a good callback.
yep.
Yeah.
That's one of the other things in my story is everywhere you look, there is a reference to another Zelda game. As much as it is like a self-contained story, as much as it is, set in this very specific slot of the timeline, I reference every single game in some way or another. I I even there's a scene as the main characters are going to Death Mountain. They cross the gates of Kakariko Village. There are two guards standing out there. It's now actually called Kakariko City. It's grown up, it's bigger, it's better, it's new and improved. It's but there's two guards standing outside, and their names are Soto and Moto. And the way they talk, and well, not the way they talk, but what they talk about is they're excited they have an idea for a new game that they want to bring to the city that would involve jumping on platforms, and maybe some of the platforms look like turtles. They're supposed to be a reference to Satoru Iwata and Shigeru Miyamoto, hence their names, Soto and Moto, and the game jumping on turtles. That's Mario.
Yes. Oh, that's cute.
And it's just like this. That's just one of like these like little nuggets of information that I just like. I put it in there because I'm like, this fits. It fits. It's kind of funny. It's a little break from some of the serious stuff that's going on. It's and I wanted to pay respects to the late Satoru Iwata and the still with us, obviously. Thank you, Shigeru Miyamoto. Because hey, they gave us Zelda. So without them, I wouldn't have this story. So they have to be in it somewhere. And even if it is just this little, these two silly guards standing out front talking about making a game.
Easter egg.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yes.
But I mean, I have references to other Zelda games in there too. One of the characters that you meet early on, his name is Sir Ralphine. It's Ralph from Oracle of Ages. I named one of the Zora sages. Her name is Rutella.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably, Rutella could have just been a name in this timeline, the same as Twilight Princess. Mm-hmm. So her appearance, actually, all the artwork that I drew for her looks exactly like Rutella, but she's a little different in my story. And once you read and catch up to it, you'll see exactly how different she is. She's very, very different than she would be in Twilight Princess, but it's the same name and it looks the same. So you could kind of think of them as like mirror images or parallel universes kind of thing. There's another small reference that a character makes to Breath of the Wild, like they're talking about maybe an ancestor of mine one day could do this, and it's I'm not going to spoil that one, but when you get to that point, it is when you read that line in that chapter, you're like, oh my gosh, I know exactly who you're talking about. And then you just get a little like, oh.
I love those kind of moments, especially you have such a rich series to work with to grab references from.
Yep.
I do want to know, I think I could, I don't know if I could answer. I'm going to guess. Ed, is your favorite race the Kikwees that we talked about, would you say?
Not really. I really don't have a favorite race in the Zelda series.
Or is there one that you would like to see explored more?
Actually, no.
Well, that's a boring answer.
No, I put him on the spot.
I think because it's the Legend of Zelda series to me is always about the journey, and it's more about the creative dungeons that's going to be put in. The weapons that I'm going to be using, the exploration around this world, and just beautiful moments with the music and like little cutscenes and stuff. So there's little things that incorporate it. So pretty much every race that's in the game, even Ganon and Ganondorf, just those two, they're important to my journey because I know that you are the ultimate goal, but I want to know what are you going to do to really challenge me, and is it going to be worth it? Because like that frozen time fight in Wind Waker, you have to play that. It demands to be played, and if it's your first time, you cannot let nobody help you. You have to go in and play that because it's a moment that's just like, it's challenging, but it's so revealing. Like it's so therapeutic and it's so fun to enter in.
I love that moment in the Wind Waker. That is, as somebody who's essentially writing the backstory that leads up to that moment that gets frozen in time, I love that moment. Wind Waker is on my list of Zelda games. It is number 2, right behind Ocarina of Time, which kind of should be obvious based on the story that I wrote, But it is that moment in the Wind Waker is like, that is such an iconic storytelling moment. You go, you've done all this stuff on the Great Sea. You're like, cool, all right, let's go where are we going? We're going down. What's down below the water? Oh, what? Why is this all black and white? But and then you pull the Master Sword, and oh, it's such a moment,
It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I have a favorite character, of course, that's Link, out of the whole series. But I like all the races and everything. I like everything is important to me in Zelda, and the way that they portray them and put it out. If I had to say that my favorite race is, it's the artwork.
That's okay.
Because
That is fair. That is
because
fair.
each Zelda game, even Link 1 and Link 2, like the way that the artwork is done in each game just really brings out what the story is going to be about. And like from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask to Wind Waker to Minish Cap to Spirit Tracks to even the new Link's Awakening. Like the new Link's Awakening is just like good night. This is gorgeous.
Yes. It
And
reminds
like
me of those little people toys.
Yeah, it's like a diorama. Yeah.
yeah, like all of that, like if you're going to give me a Zelda game, make sure that the artwork that you guys are going to use is really fitting for your story, and it's never let me down. So if I had to say race or care or race or anything, it's the artwork.
That's
Sure.
a deep answer. Do you have one, David? I think he kind of gave you a pretty high bar right there
Yeah.
to reach.
So I kind of same way. Like I don't have like a favorite race. Like I mean, it when I have when I built my story as a game and what I'm kind of working with right now, I gravitate towards the Hylians just because I feel like I can relate to them. Because they're for all intents and purposes they're humans. They're the humans in that world. They're not, but they're because Link is our avatar, because he is our stand-in, he's our link to that world. I associate with him, therefore I associate with the Hylians. It's that's how I feel about that. That's that I would love to see the Sheikah explored more, and I really hope we get that out of Breath of the Wild too. I really do. I feel like Breath of the Wild did explore them, but not in the way that I wanted. I love Breath of the Wild, but there's a lot of things that were just off the mark for me with that game overall, and that's why it's like I can't put it in my top three. Like it's just there all of it. There was something that was just off with it slightly, and just left me wanting just that little bit more. Like go just that little bit further with it, and they never did. But I'm hoping to see that more in Breath of the Wild too, and because like I said earlier, one of my favorite places in Ocarina of Time was the Shadow Temple. Why? Because it was so dark, so mysterious, and it's so intimately tied to the Sheikah. And it makes you sit there and wonder, what? And that you could say, and I guess that's really what I would love to see explored is what was that? Not necessarily that I want to see necessarily the atrocities that went on in there or whatever you presume that it can imply went on inside there, but I want to see the why, the how, the who, I want to see the experience that led into that. So I guess maybe the Sheikah, and that would be my answer. And again, that's coming at it from a storytelling perspective of I want to see the story. I want to know what the story is behind this place. And so I come at it not necessarily as what's my favorite, but maybe who I'd like to see the most of, and that would be the Sheikah. I would love to see that explored in depth.
That would be amazing. The Shadow People. I love it because it's true.
Yeah.
They're very mysterious. Impa's the most intimate we get in Sheik, but I mean, that's spoiler alert for anybody who has not played Ocarina of Time.
But if you play Smash Brothers,
yeah.
Okay. Well, if you play Smash Brothers, you know by now that it's Zelda. You know what? As y'all were talking, this came to my mind. In Majora's Mask, whenever you can disguise yourself or turn into a Zora, a Goron, or a Deku, that's when those people in those particular races are more open with you. That's when you can truly delve into their secrets and you learn more. Because if you approach them as Hylian Link, sometimes you're not even allowed in certain areas.
Right.
Yeah.
So that I didn't think of it that deeply when I was playing Majora's Mask. I just thought it was cool that I could swim and hit things with my fins. but that was a really neat mechanic.
It's really deep. Like, I'm just now replaying Majora's Mask for my son. He watched a little bit of it during the Zelda Dungeon marathon and has since been like, I want you to play this, Daddy, play it. And
he's not scared.
He's scared of like the opening, like when you first put the cartridge in, turn it on, and it does the with Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
That kind of freaks him out. But other than that, he seems to be handling it really well, which is good, and I'm really excited to keep playing. But so the when you finish the Woodfall Temple, you can go do the Deku Butler's race to get the Mask of Sense. When you get to the end of that, he talks about how you remind him of his son, about how he used to do this, but he's gone missing. Like, his son left a while back, and he's not heard from him since, and he's regretful for it. At the very, very beginning of the game, and at the very, very end of the game, you see it as well. You pass this twisted tree that's like petrified. Before you're even, it's right after you've been cursed, but you haven't actually entered Termania yet. And you if you look at it, Tattle tells you that, or not Tattle, is it Tattle or Tail that you have as your companion now?
Tattle.
Okay. Yeah. Tattle, yeah. Tattle tells you, like, looks at it and goes, "Wow, this, that you kind of look like this thing. It looks really sad. Just looking at it makes me feel like I could cry." It's very much implied that is the Deku Butler's son, who was killed by the Skull Kid in Majora's Mask, and you're now wearing his soul because you inherit the souls of of Darmani and Mika. Play the song Healing for them. Their souls essentially bind into the mask and fuse, I guess would be a good word for it, with Link when he puts the mask on. And so I have to assume that the reason they're always so open with you is because some of them think you're that person, and some of them just recognize that you hear people talk about, oh, you've got the spirit of so and so in you. That's what they see in you. That's what they see in Link. That's what I'd have to think with that.
And the transformation, there's some agony during it. It kind of bothered me. I like to hurry through it because I don't like watching Link writhe in pain.
My son went a little quiet when I first put on the Deku mask after that, because you can't skip it the first time you put on the mask, unfortunately. So I'm like, all right, look, we're going to go hop across the water. Look, isn't that funny?
Oh, poor little thing.
He's doing fine. He's, like I said, I think he's doing just fine with it. He has not woken up having a nightmare saying Majora's Mask is coming to get him, so that's a good thing. He hasn't done that yet. He did, apparently this morning, he did say he was, I guess, in the living room while my wife was feeding our daughter breakfast, and I guess he was in the living room playing, and then came into the kitchen where my wife was and said, "I don't want to be in there right now. Majora's Mask is on the TV." And my wife looks in, TV's off, and it's like, no? Okay. So
it's a pretty terrifying game for a kid of that age.
It is. He's a tough kid. Like, I mean, I'll give him, like, he's a tough kid. This kid, it was a few months before this, like, I'd handed him the Wii U pad to play Breath of the Wild, because I'm a dinosaur and didn't pick up a Switch until like a year after it came out, which meant I played Breath of the Wild in its entirety on the Wii U and still do.
Me too.
Yeah. But he loves playing that game, and I've watched this kid go out and kill Guardians. Like, he's like 4 years old. He's like running around. This is fun, killing a Guardian. And he knows how to equip the Master Sword. And I'm like, okay, yep, you got this, kiddo. Like, yep, all right, good, you got it.
I think he's the true hero of time, dude.
Right.
He might be. He was. He wanted to. He loves it so much that he wanted to be Link for Halloween last year. So he was Breath of the Wild Link for Halloween. It was awesome. There's pictures of it on Twitter somewhere. Because I wore my Toon Link like hoodie and wore my ocarina around my neck and walked around together. Yeah, his Master Sword and Hylian shield, and was like just all proud of it and stuff, and it was cool.
So cute. Starting them off on the right foot. I
Oh,
would
yeah.
say.
Now, as far as right foot, when Link's Awakening came out, I picked it up day one. It came out on my birthday. It was so happy. His birthday is 2 days after mine, so I played it first, and then a couple days later, I handed the controller to him, started him in his own file, and said, "Here you go. This is yours." He played it for all of 10 minutes, and then asked to play Mario Odyssey. So
That's okay. It's
Yeah,
a tricky one. It's a
yeah,
different experience from
yep,
other Zelda games.
yeah, it is.
Give it time. Give it
Yeah,
time.
oh yeah, but
Oh, so cute. Well, Ed, is there or David, is there anything else y'all wanted to say?
Well, we the last portion I had the Breath of the Wild trilogy that
Mhm.
I wanted to bring to you. What are your thoughts about it? Do you think there's going to be a trilogy, or if there is, what would you like to see for Breath of the Wild 3?
so I mentioned this a little while ago. I don't remember if it was before we started recording or not. I wrote an editorial over on Zelda Dungeon talking about what Breath of the Wild 2 could take from Zelda 2. In that, I talked about a lot of stuff about how they could what they could do with Ganondorf, how it could be like people are coming trying to revive him just like in Zelda 2. But then at the end, I did hint that this is where they could absolutely steer it into a trilogy, and I think they should. And the third one, if the second one is Ganondorf, the third one has to be Dark Link. You have to have Dark Link be your main end villain. And I kind of made it like, because I was trying to draw connections to Zelda 2 in that article, there was a lot of push. I made a lot of references to Dark Link in it about that. But then I did at the end, I hinted at what if this then spun into that trilogy where the third part, Ganondorf is defeated, everything looks like it's really all hunky dory, but a piece of Link was taken. When Ganondorf is defeated, a piece of Link gets taken. Now in the reveal trailer, you see that shot of Link holding his arm and it's like turning all green and stuff. It looks like it's turning into the hand that was originally holding Ganondorf down. And there's been countless theories produced about that now. But what if there's a piece of that, like whatever that does, if that's like a transformation, if it's a superpower, whatever it is, at the end of the game, if he somehow like sheds that, loses that, what if what he sheds, what if a piece of malice essentially fuses with a piece of Link, maybe like Metroid style, with like Dark Samus, and you get Dark Link out of that, and that is where the third Breath of the Wild comes in, and it's all out to the wall, go for it, Link versus Dark Link showdown at the end, and then you get and I want if that happens, I want pure I want Twilight Princess level final boss fight, like the final showdown with Ganondorf that you have in that game. I want that cranked up to 11 with Dark Link.
That would be amazing, please, because that fight is Twilight Princess is my favorite one.
Right.
Ocarina is probably my second favorite, and that fight, especially even the bridge fight while you're on your horse.
Yep. Oh yeah. Or I mean, the Wind Waker to me has one. Twilight Princess is absolutely probably the top overall like ending fight, but like to me like there's nothing beats the ending of the Wind Waker when you do that perfect parry, you roll around.
Yes, for thematic purposes. Just
an unforgettable moment, and I want something like that. Maybe if we can get that in Breath of the Wild, and then the Twilight Princess-esque one in Breath of the Wild 3, okay, I won't complain. I'd be all for that.
All right. Well, everybody, that is going to be it for our 1v1. David, thank you again. Where can we find you at? And where can people find your...
You can find me on Twitter at DaveWayne09. You can follow me there, or you can follow, if you want to just follow the Arrow Without Hero stuff, it's at Zelda Tewa, which is the TEWAH, the Arrow Without a Hero. Just the acronym for it. And so if you ever see a post where I mention Tewa or say something about that, that's it. You can always find me somewhere over in the Zelda Dungeon Discord. The Arrow Without a Hero has its own Discord as well, and you should be able to find that on either of my Twitters. I've posted about it. I'll post again so that it's more recent. You can look for my articles over on zeldadungeon.net. Right now, actually, this Friday will be the third part. The third part of this run will be part 26 of the Arrow Without a Hero on there. The chapters are a little shorter. So if you want to read just the full chapters in their entirety, you can just go over to arrowwithoutahero.wordpress.com. And that'll pull it up there, and you can read a little bit more about the story. You can look for, I'm going to be posting some new stuff there. And I've got something special cooking up that's coming out at the end of this week. So it'll be August 1st. I don't know exactly when this will be going out. So August 1st, if that's after this or before this, whatever, I'm going to be launching something special for the Arrow Without a Hero fans that they can actually take part in and be a part of the backstory of the main story.
What?
Backstory of the backstory of the mid story of the. It's something that people will be able to do and have fun with, and I really hope they enjoy it. I've been putting a lot of work into this. My wife has been having to suffer as my guinea pig for it.
Gosh! Okay, I need to know what this is because that sounds.
I'll tell you after the recording because if it isn't out yet, I don't want to spoil it. So.
Celeste, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at FairyCrypt and also at anotherzeldapodcast.com. And you can follow Another Zelda Podcast on Twitter and Instagram as well. And what about you, Ed?
You guys can find me on Twitter at ThatButcherCode. You can check more of our content at BossRushGames.com and on our YouTube page at BossRushGames. Follow us on Twitter at BossRushPodcast. And yes, thank you, David, for this 1v1 all things Zelda. Celeste, any last words?
I am so happy you want to be an English teacher because mine certainly inspired me like yours did as well.
We need more teachers.
Yes. That could be a whole other podcast episode about. Oh man! But thank you so much, David. It was a pleasure to meet you virtually after interacting on Twitter. And any Zelda fan is a friend of mine. So thank you.
Thank you guys for having me.
You're welcome. And everybody, we will see you next time on 1v1. And as always, let's continue to play video games and be better to one another. With that, we will see you next time on 1v1. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.